Well, hello again, and welcome to your third biology lecture video. But before we begin, let's go from the beginning here. Let's review our 1.2 objectives that we discussed at the last lesson. And when we read these, think about what you remember from them in your mind and review. Explain how scientific attitudes generate new ideas. Be able to describe the importance of peer review. Explain what a scientific theory is. And explain the relationship between science and society. So think about those in your mind, and if you have any questions, please ask me or review in the book too. Let's move on. The goal of today's lessons is to be able to describe the scientific theory of cells and relate the history of its discovery to the process of science. It's a very general, broad goal, and we'll be focusing on that a lot more in our year here. But right now we're just giving a brief overview. Excuse me with that. That's going to happen once in a while. Announcements. All right, so our 1.3 specific objectives are to list the characteristics of living things, identify the central themes of biology, explain how life can be studied at different levels, and also discuss the importance of a universal system of measurement. So let's take those one at a time. All right. So the characteristic of living things is the first objective. This is not a simple task, but the broad overview answer for that is living things are made up of basic units called cells, and these are based on universal genetic code. They obtain and use materials and energy. They grow and develop, reproduce, respond to their environment, maintain a stable environment, and they're able to change over time too. So biology is the study of life, but what is life? No single characteristic is enough to describe a living thing. Also, some living things share more than one trait with organisms. And then there's such things as viruses that exist at the border between organisms and non-living things. So we're going to look at what scientists classify as something living. First of all, living things are based on a universal genetic code, DNA. Deoxyribonucleic acid. It is stored in all organisms and controls what they need to live, grow, and reproduce. DNA is a substance of genes and passed on to its offspring from parents. Each chromosome has one very long DNA molecule with hundreds or thousands of genes arranged along its length. With a few minor variations, life universal genetic code DNA is almost identical in every organism. And we'll learn a lot more about that too. That's the first characteristic. The next one is living things grow and develop. Each organism has a set pattern for growth and development, a set pattern for growth and development. For example, like the baby alligator right there too. Another characteristic of living things must be able to respond to their environment. Organisms detect and respond to stimuli from their environment. It's like a supply and demand economy that goes on in your system. For example, when your muscles require more energy, they increase their consumption of sugar molecules that provide fuel. That's cellular respiration, and we'll learn a lot about that. But how does the body know when to stop the increase in consumption of sugar? The key is the ability of many biological processes to self-regulate by giving feedback. Negative feedback is when the output of the product regulates and then slows down the very process. A good example of this, an analogy for this would be like, maybe it's cold in your house and you turn the heat on, right? And as you know how a thermometer works, the heat will go up to a certain level and then it will shut off. So as the house warms up, it gets warmer and warmer, and then it shuts off itself with the thermometer. That's negative feedback, and that's how it kind of works in your body too. The opposite type of feedback is also called what you would imagine would be positive feedback too. And in this case, the output product actually speeds up more of the production. That doesn't happen as much as in our system, but it does happen. But negative feedback is the primary risk feedback that we have in most organisms. Moving on to another characteristic. Living things reproduce, which means that they produce similar organisms. Most plants and animals engage in sexual reproduction. Other organisms, like bacteria, reproduce through asexual reproduction, producing an offspring identical to itself. You can think about the implications if humans were asexual reproducers too. Another characteristic is living things maintain a stable internal environment. You should know what this is called. This is called homeostasis. A little history check here for you. In 1851, there was a French scientist named Claude Bernard, and that's him pictured right here. See that dude? And he discovered that nerves in an animal's body controlled the dilation and constriction of blood vessels. So he noticed that on hot days, the blood vessels of the skin become dilated, expanded, and on cold days they constricted. He explained that this is a function to regulate the body temperature. Basically, he was the first to develop the concept of organisms maintaining an internal balance, and it's called homeostasis. You'll be intimately familiar with that word too. Next characteristic of living things is they obtain and use material energy. Organisms must take in materials and energy to grow, develop, and reproduce. Metabolism is the combination of chemical reactions through which an organism builds up or breaks down materials. The summary of these chemical reactions through which an organism builds up or breaks down is called metabolism. There are two types of metabolism. Catabolism, which is exothermic, which means gives off energy, and anabolism, which is a building up of energy. I just want you to be familiar with those two terms. You'll probably be seeing them again. And we'll be discussing those a little more in class too. Another characteristic is that living things are made up of cells. Cells are the smallest unit considered fully alive. They can perform all activities required for life. Cells can grow, respond to their surroundings, and reproduce. They are small, but they are highly complex and highly organized. There are two types of cells that you need to be aware of, eukaryotic and prokaryotic, and we'll be talking about those again a lot more too. Another thing that our living organisms have in common characteristic is taken as a group, living things evolve. Organisms change over time. Evidence of this is found in all aspects of living and fossil organisms. This evolutionary chain links all forms of life. Well, those are the characteristics of living things. Go back and review if you don't remember something, because you will be responsible for all of those. Moving on to our next objective. Identify the central themes of biology. The study of biology revolves around several interlocking big ideas: the cellular basis of life, information and heredity, matter and energy, growth, development and reproduction, homeostasis, evolution, structure and function, unity and diversity of life, interdependence of nature, and science as a way of knowing. Some of these things we touched on with the characteristics of living things, so we're just going to go through these pretty briefly. So the cellular basis of life. As we said before, all living things are made up of cells. Some are single-cell organisms, others are multicellular. In fact, the human body has over 200 different types of eukaryotic cells. Another thing is information heredity. Living things based on the universal genetic code, DNA, which can also affect your health. The universal genetic code is DNA, I should say. Next one is matter and energy. Matter and energy, because life requires matter that serves as nutrients to build body structures and energy that fuels life's processes. Plants use energy from sunlight, while other organisms obtain energy and nutrient from eating plants, like me and you. Next is growth and development and reproduction. All living things reproduce. As they mature, cells typically become more and more different and specialized for particular functions, like the brain, muscles, and digestive systems. Homeostasis is the ability of maintaining a relatively stable internal environment. A breakdown in homeostasis can be fatal. Evolution. Excuse me. Evolution links all forms of life to a common origin more than 3.5 million years ago. Evolutionary theory is the central organizing principle of all biological sciences. Structure and function is next. Each organism has a collection of structures that have evolved in ways that make a particular function possible. Wings, for example, give birds and insects the ability to fly. Unity and diversity. Life is very diversified. Just look around, look outside the windows of the classroom. But the essence of all living things are fundamentally similar at the molecular level. We are carbon-based molecules. DNA and protein is what we're pretty much all made of. The next is interdependence in nature. There are relationships between organisms and their environments depend on the cycling of matter and the flow of energy in our biosphere. We are a living planet on a living planet. Finally, the last big idea of biology is science as a way of knowing. And we've talked about this in the first lesson. Science is not a list of facts, but a way of knowing and understanding the world around us. With knowledge and understanding, we are able to take actions that affect the events in the world around us. So those are the central themes of biology. The next objective is to be able to explain how life can be studied at different levels. Biology includes many overlapping fields that use different tools to study life from the level of molecules to the entire planet. So let's look at these fields a little more closely. The first is global ecology. This is based because life on Earth is shaped by weather patterns and processes in the atmosphere that we are just beginning to understand. Activities of living organisms, including us humans, profoundly affect both the atmosphere and climate. Global ecological studies enable us to learn about global impact, which affects all life on Earth. For example, an ecologist may monitor lichens in a forest in efforts to study the effects of air pollution on forest health. So that's global ecology. The next field is biotechnology. The field of biotechnology is based on our ability to edit and rewrite the genetic code. We may certainly learn to correct or replace damaged genes that cause inherited diseases or genetically engineered bacteria to clean up toxic waste. Biotechnology raises enormous ethical, legal, and social questions, as you can imagine. What types of ethics, legal, and social questions can you think of? Another field of biology is biologists who are building the tree of life. Charles Darwin proposed that natural selection could cause an ancestral species to give rise to two or more descendant species. This could occur, for example, if one population fragmented into several subpopulations, isolated in different environments, like his famous finches. Biologists have discovered and identified to date roughly 1.8 million different kinds of living organisms, and researchers estimate that somewhere between 2 and 100 million more forms of life are waiting to be discovered around the globe. Paleontologists study signs of ancient lives, like in fossil dinosaur dung, which, by the way, I have a sample of in my classroom, so make sure you ask to see it. In addition to identifying and cataloging all these life forms, biologists aim to combine the latest genetic information with computer technology to organize all living things into a single universal tree of all life and put the results on the web in a form that anyone can access. Ecology and evolution of infectious diseases. This is studying the relationship between host and pathogens. It's very dynamic and constantly changing. Organisms that cause human disease have their own ecology. And you know what that is? Our bodies. The medicines we take and our interactions with each other in the environment, and understanding these interactions is crucial to safeguarding our future. You may have heard on the news that bacteria is becoming more and more resilient to antibiotics due to the overuse of antibiotics. So this is studying the ecology and evolution of infectious diseases, and if you're interested in this form of biology, you could be a great asset to our future. It's a problem. Oh. All right, genomics and molecular biology is the next field of study. These fields focus on the studies of DNA and other molecules inside cells. Genomics is now looking at the entire sets of DNA code contained in a wide range of organisms. Computer analysis enables researchers to compare vast databases of genetic information in search of keys to the mysteries of growth, development, aging, cancer, and the history of life on Earth. That's another great field of biology too. Very interesting. All right, so those are the fields of biologies. And our last objective today is to discuss the importance of the universal system of measurement. And we'll be practicing this in class. Because researchers need to replicate one another's experiments, and because many experiments involve gathering quantitative data, scientists need a common system of measurement. Most scientists use the metric system when collecting and performing experiments. The metric system is a decimal system of measurements whose units are based on certain physical standards and are scaled on multiples of 10. Did you know, quick fact, that the definition of a meter, how they came up with the length of a meter, is the distance light travels in a vacuum in 299,792,458 seconds? There you go. Fun fact for you. Here are some scientific measurement units just for your information. And some common metric units. All right, some more. And I was going to have you guys do this in class. Converting within the common units of measurement. And we'll practice that in class. And here are some more common conversions and equations that you'll be familiar with and be practicing in class too. All right, so can you list the characteristics of living things, identify the central themes of biology, explain how life can be studied at different levels, and discuss the importance of universal system of measurement? Can you do those things? Well, those were the objectives for today, so I hope so. You guys have a great evening. Bye.